From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
Wow, that's not our usual introduction. Welcome to Picture This. I can't imagine why we would be playing When I'm 64. Lou, do you have any idea? I mean, what happened to our Kodachrome song?
I'm not sure. That was a surprise to me.
Really? Now, I'm shocked to learn this. I'm pretty sure you had a birthday this week.
Yes, I did.
And how old would you, what birthday was this?
That was 64.
Your 64th birthday. Boy, are you old. And like they said there, you're losing your hair. You're old and gray. Is that right?
Getting that way, yes.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky. You have a little more hair than I do, but not much. Okay, so enough of that. We've got a guest in the studio tonight, Wayne Cathell. Good to have you here, Wayne.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You're welcome. We've got a couple of regular features to get to tonight. And Lou, what have you got for us?
Well, what I have is a website, I try to have, which is about wildlife photography by a photographer in Scotland by the name of Ron McComb.
Okay.
And you can find him on wildlife-photography.uk.com. Award-winning photographer and all kinds of stuff. It's real easy to find when you get to his website. Up at the top, there'll be several different options, and one of them will say photography, which will open up about a dozen galleries.
Cool.
Some very inspiring stuff, great wildlife photographer, and highly recommend. It's a good way to get inspired.
Very good. Yeah, I'm checking his site out now. Ron McComb's Wildlife Photography. They've got a newsletter you can subscribe to. He's got some books on Blurb, a Facebook, YouTube. He's got a Tumblr account. So lots to check out there. And it says his website is rated 171st on the top birding 1,000. So for you birders out there, looks like he's got a wide variety of things. Does some workshops, cool stuff. Thanks,
but
Lou.
Not just birds. There's other stuff,
yeah,
too.
I was looking at that. Under his photography, he's got mammals, landscapes, flowers, UK trips abroad. Abroad, he's got Canada, Finland, a number of things. So very good. That looks like a good site. I'll check that out this week. This week in photography history, I've actually got two events that happened this week in the past. A birth and a death. The birth is probably a photographer that not a lot of people are going to recognize that name. It's not a household name to most of us. But he won a Pulitzer Prize for this image, and it's a very iconic image from the Vietnam-era war. And his name is Malcolm Brown, and he was born April 17th, 1931. But he was in Saigon in 1963 when a Buddhist monk doused himself with gasoline, set himself on fire. He was the AP chief photographer, bureau chief in South Vietnam at that time, and captured the monk setting himself on fire in protest of the war and the treatment of Buddhists by the South Vietnamese government. And again, that was a whole different era, of course, but that, and we talked a few weeks ago about the Eddie Adams winning a Pulitzer. So that conflict produced, it was tragic, but produced a lot of award-winning photojournalism. And my other one, unfortunately, are a couple of deaths that happened this week, just 2 years ago. So this is still pretty fresh. It was this week in Libya, just 2 years ago, two photojournalists, Tim Hetherington and Chris Hondros, working for the BBC and working for the New York Times. They were covering conflict in Libya during the civil war there, and Muammar Gaddafi's forces just really shelled and bombed this town, and we lost two great conflict photographers 2 weeks ago. one of them had been considered full of Pulitzer in 2004. And Chris Hondros, there's a nonprofit fund set up. If you Google Chris Hondros Fund, it's to help support photojournalists and raise awareness that the dangers conflict photographers face on a day-to-day basis. So that's what happened this week in photography. So we've got in the studio and I can call Wayne a friend of mine. I've known Wayne for several years. We've shot some things together, so to speak. And it's a pleasure having you in the studio tonight, Wayne.
Hey, thanks for having me. What a great forum you guys have here. This is a nice thing for the photographers out there.
Yeah, and so starting off a little bit, what can you tell us about your business?
Well, I started probably shooting back when I was a small child, Polaroids of my sister at the house. And that was really my start. And then I got into 35 millimeter a little bit, just playing around as a hobby. And then once the price of digital came down, I jumped into that and been doing it ever since for like the last 12 years.
What was your first digital camera?
It was a Canon.
Really?
Yeah, little G1.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That thing was $600 when it came out. 10
it
years ago.
was more than that. Let me tell you. I bought one right when it came out before Christmas in 2000.
Oh, yeah.
And I paid, and this was at like Ritz's cost or a little bit over. I paid like $1,000, $1,100 when that thing was new. It dropped pretty quick, but you got a steal at $600.
Good. But good camera to start out with.
Oh, yeah.
Had all the functions that you need to kind of train on.
Oh, yeah.
Then the DSLRs came out, and the prices came down on those dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
Almost compatible to that camera.
Sure.
Price. And so I got into it a little deeper. Mm-hmm. And still doing it today.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, let me ask you a question, Wayne. What have been some of your more interesting or challenging assignments or jobs that you've done?
About 2 weeks ago, I was assigned to shoot Zach Shannon's procession that came back from Tampa. And it came from MacDill, and then it went by the high school in Dunedin. And I've shot 2 of these before. Unfortunately, I've had to shoot these events. But this one was just, I don't know, it was different. Trying to capture the people, and it was just very emotional.
Sure.
Capture, to see, this kid's body come by the high school with his friends, saluting, and the mayor there. But that one was tough for me. Just trying to get the right angle, and you try to tell the story through the picture, and being at the right spot is key. But that was tough. I had a tough time doing it. And then I left there and then ran or drove to the funeral home, which was 5 miles away, and got there. Traffic was stopped, and I had to run a half mile through the traffic. I left the car on the side of the road, the lights blinking, and got there just as he's turning in, and
Wow.
got those shots too. So trying to cover 2 places at once and trying to tell a story through that was challenging.
Yeah, very much so. And and that's part of something I think that people may not always realize is that when you're covering an event or a ceremony or something from a photojournalistic standpoint, you're trying to show something to the people that aren't there. So you've got to have that unique perspective and unique viewpoint and all. But that would certainly be a tough event to do. Now you've done some things over at Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, as a small kid, I used to watch all the Apollo moon landings and watch them from my little house in Columbus, Ohio, and thought, I was watching these people on this causeway, watching these launches at night.
Sure.
Sometimes. I'm like, it seemed so far away. It seemed like, something like a dream that you could
Sure.
never achieve.
Sure.
And in full circle, I was able to get some press passes and shoot probably the last 6 or 7 launches over there at the media press site. So
Right.
to see that, to be that close to something I always grew up with and have a passion for, it's a huge honor to be over there.
Mm-hmm.
To watch. Even the last one that left out of Kennedy to fly over to California.
Right.
Discovery. When we got that flight, we were able to shoot from the roof of the building.
The assembly building.
The
or
assembly
something?
building.
Yeah.
We got the chance to ride the elevators that all the Apollo astronauts rode. And,
Oh, yeah.
got on top of that roof right before sunrise, and it took off and probably did 2 or 3 laps right over the building. And we got to sit there and just had our fun with that.
Oh yeah.
And then did a low approach to the the runway and then took off and headed out to California. But what a great vantage point from up there.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
You do some motorsports too, I think.
I do. I've shot the Grand Prix here locally for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
So running down there is a treat because they cut the fences out for you to get down there, and these cars coming by you at 150 miles an hour, kicking up rocks and your lens. And
is that why you wanted to borrow my lens that weekend? Jeez. Oh boy, buddy, I didn't know that. Jeez.
Should have left that part out.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun. Get down there in the pits to see these drivers up close, to see what's really like to be down there. It's a treat.
Sure. Cool.
Yeah.
But so you're doing some sports things in the Kennedy Space Center. But I'm assuming you're also editing some of these images as well. What software are you using these days?
I use Lightroom a little bit when I can. Sometimes everything can't be edited. Sometimes it's got to go right away. It's got to be sent directly.
Because you're under a deadline.
Or it'll go directly to the editor, and then they'll do it in-house.
Sure.
So it's like I'll shoot it, send it, and then they take care of it. But if I have some time, I could, work on a little bit. It'll go through Lighthouse.
Sure. Lightroom, probably.
Lightroom. Thank you.
Hey, not a problem.
That's how much I use it. But I do use, I hate to say this, but, Picasa has gotten me through some quick jams.
Well, it's quick, it's free, and if it does what you need, it's just what I say. It's the right tool at the right time.
It is, and it's got me through some stuff real quick, and got it in, got it out, and got it out there.
Cool.
Absolutely.
If anybody has a question for Wayne, we're taking calls. You can call us at 727-441-3000 or toll free 866-826-1340. And if you want to email us a question, email us at picturethis.questions@gmail.com. And Sue has emailed you a question, Wayne. She would like to know about some of your training as a photojournalist, and if you have any recommendations for someone who's interested in that genre of photography.
YouTube is your best friend.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well,
search it.
I have no formal training. I've all been self-taught, and these days with YouTube, and if you want to know how to light a face or light a room or a sandwich, type it into YouTube, and somebody's done it that's spent the money that's gone to school, and let them tell you how to do it in 4 minutes.
And I think it's a matter of perseverance. When I was younger, I shot some jobs in Cincinnati, but I mean, this was a film era, it was a different thing, and but I knew a fella. Boy, I'm trying to think his name, and he just hung out at the Cincinnati Enquirer, and hung out. Glenn Hartung was his name. And he hung out, got himself a scanner, and would go to some of these things that he knew the photographers probably were stretched too thin, and especially in today's world. And he would shoot accident scenes and this stuff and run them down to the paper. And so they started giving him some jobs here and there that, the staff was thin. Here, go shoot this. We'll give you a pass, and we'll give you 10 rolls of film and that kind of stuff. And Glenn has probably been a staff. I mean, he did that for a few years. Finally, there was an opening, and they hired him. And and I wouldn't say that's the best way to get a job, but it just shows where perseverance. And that's what I've admired about you, is that you just keep plugging away at this stuff, and you've made some breaks for yourself, and you're enjoying it.
I really am. And that little G1 we talked about. Our local newspaper here, I contacted them and, hey, do you guys need a freelance photographer?
Yep.
And they said, well, we might. And I stopped down and show us your work. I'm like, work? I didn't tell him that, but I ran out and took some shots with that G1.
Yeah.
Got it 8x10s, put it in a book, took it down there, and they loved it.
Yep.
So that little camera has really got me started.
Yeah.
Freelancing with them, and I'm still with them today.
Yeah.
Well, and getting started that way, a large part of it is the courage to say, I know I can do this.
Right. And I have friends that say, man, you should do something with your work. It's great. You've got a great eye. And I'm like, I don't know. And until you just take that step, and find a local newspaper and just call them up. Hey, you need anybody to take extra pictures of anything, and get your foot in. And they're the ones that has given me the golden pass, which is the press credential to get into NASA, to get on the sidelines of these NFL games,
right,
to shoot PGA and be under the ropes.
Yep.
So that little ticket, I don't make much for a photo, but it's that golden ticket that gets you into these things.
And it enables you to build a portfolio,
right?
So that if you were to, I don't know your career aspirations, but once you get a book together, then it's time to start showing it around and see where that goes. And it's all great experience to be able to do that. And I shot one time wasn't a Grand Prix, I don't know what you would have called them, but it was in Columbus, and they had a race. They only did it a couple of years.
Oh, around the streets.
Yeah.
They were Le Mans type
they were
prototypes.
Yeah.
I shot there.
Yeah, and
might
I
have
did
been there at the same time.
Yeah, we
and
might
not
have been.
known it.
We might have been. I was at your head that's in all of my shots. Jeez. But and we went to a little local paper, and it was a weekly, and hey, we'll go shoot this event. So they wrote us the letters and stuff, and we were just shocked. They let us in. It was like, boy, what a rinky-dink paper, but it worked.
That's right. And and getting into the paper and using that as a launch pad has gotten me jobs of commercial work.
Yeah,
because they think, hey, if you could shoot a pelican at sunset, then you can shoot my restaurant.
Yeah, well, and we talked about a year ago. You did a nice commercial job for somebody making, I forget what it was, internet switchers or something.
Oh yeah. They wanted us to shoot the whole inventory.
Line. Yeah,
and that was a 2 or 3 month project.
Yeah,
of 8 hours a day shooting that. So
and it's just business building.
Yes, and they're using those images online and
around the world.
Around the world, I'm seeing.
There you go.
Yep.
We all have influences. Who are some of your favorite photographers?
There's a local guy that shoots for the Tampa Bay Times, Dirk Shad. I don't know if you know Dirk.
Yeah.
He shoots for the Times here locally, and I just see this guy in all the places I shoot. Like he's at the Grand Prix, he's at the hockey games, and I just kind of watch him and see, because he's printed every day. His stuff.
Yeah.
He goes from shooting a sporting event to covering real life situations or a house fire, but he's very versatile in what he does, and he's not tied into one thing, and he can get out there and just, I watch how he works, I watch how he tries to get that angle or get away from the crowd and run and get a shot from a distance, and I see it in the paper the next day. I'm like, okay, that's how he did that.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where he's looking for that view that it's going to show people what, even if they were there, they might not have seen it. But certainly the person at home, so they're always looking for that unique angle, that puts them in the spot, so to speak.
Yeah, he was one of the first guys in the area, I don't know, he may be in the country, to shoot when we were in the Stanley Cup here. He shot from the ceiling of that Tampa Bay Times building.
Right.
He shot straight down on top of the goalie.
Yeah.
And got some amazing, he had a rig up there,
a
remote, and he set that up. And some of the best pictures, from that tournament was from that angle.
Yeah.
And just real creative guy. And I see him out there all the way down to shooting the turkey trot, which is a local run. I mean, he does it all. He's out there shooting it all. So
the turkey trot. Yeah. That was I'd never really paid much attention to that event, but I got stuck in it this year trying to. And I got detoured here, detoured there. It's like, God, does this thing never end?
What are you doing up at 7 o'clock in the morning?
Well, they were still going at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock.
Right.
But any event, that's those are great. Any other favorites? I kind of cut you off there.
No, he's just the one I see out there all the time.
Yeah.
There's a Sports Illustrated guy. I can't think of his name offhand. That's pretty talented. But Dirk, he's one of my idols. Locally.
Well, we'll try to get him on the show sometime.
Oh, absolutely should. Hope he'll say I'm one of his idols.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Wayne guy.
Wayne
He's
who?
Everywhere. I see him everywhere. So, what kind of what other things are you doing with Bel Air Images now? I know we talked a little before the show. You're making a transition. You're changing your name. Why don't you tell us what's going on with your business?
Well, Bel Air Images. Bel Air is a little local town here,
right?
And I lived there for years, and Getty Images. I was kind of playing off that a little bit. And Bel Air is a neat little town here, and,
sure,
and pretty quaint. But I kind of played off that, and I think I've grown out of that. I'm going to go more regional instead of painting myself in this little town picture.
Yeah.
It's worked for up to this point, but I think it's now time to grow and expand and become, something like Tampa Bay or
Sure.
Just a little bigger, rebrand.
Yeah, I think that's probably in your best interest because otherwise people might go, well, if I need something on the beach, I'll talk to Wayne. But otherwise, over in Tampa. But, obviously you travel around.
I do. So I want to expand a little bit on the name and try to rebrand and I got some great traction with Beller Images. But
well, keep us posted so we can let our listeners know. We'll throw it up on the Facebook page and make sure folks can find you.
All right, I will.
So, last question.
Yes, sir.
What do you have in your camera bag when you go out to shoot? What do you take with you?
Well, everything's Canon, of course. Canon, my 50D is my backup.
Yeah.
I've got a 60D as my main.
Right.
I'm probably going to go full frame this year.
Yeah.
Just hasn't been there yet.
5D Mark III, probably.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. That's a great camera.
It is a great camera. So that's on the list. The lenses are the all prime. The 70-200 is my baby. I mean, I that's taken some incredible stuff.
Yeah, and that's a 2.8.
2.8.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's just a great mid camera or mid lens to pull out. For sports.
That's a real photojournalist tool right there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the sidelines of games, and it's just Canon 7-200s all the way down the line, and it's like wow.
Yeah,
it's like a Canon commercial down there.
Until you get to Scott Kelby with his Nikon stuff, but we won't talk about that.
And double. I've learned that you've got to have a backup of just about everything, flashes, and even a backup of some of the smaller, wider angle lenses. Mm-hmm. Because I've done work and it's stopped and you're done.
Yeah.
So I've got backups of pretty much everything now.
How many cards do you carry?
2 big ones.
Yeah.
I've gotten down to carry. I thought, I'm just going to carry 2 giant ones. They say you shouldn't carry the big ones because if you got so many images on that, you want to kind of change them out as much as you can so you don't lose those. But I don't like changing cards.
Yeah.
I like to shoot on a big card and just not worry about it.
It works both ways. I hear both theories because some people go, well, if you shoot on smaller cards, you're more likely to lose a card.
Right.
Because you've got to throw it in your bag or stick it in a pocket or this or that. Whereas one big card, you stick it in and shoot on it, and you never have to take it out. You haven't lost it. So, there's those that argue don't put all your eggs in one basket, but if you shoot with both bodies, you've got yourself covered.
Well, plus I download after every event.
Sure.
That's downloaded. Plus, I've actually missed a couple shots from changing cards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where I've been on the sidelines or something, and I had to stop. It says no images, or no, what does it say? No images.
Yeah.
Which is
no space left or
right,
something.
and you got to
card pull.
Run and grab another card and go. But
well, the 5D3 will eliminate that because that's got 2 card slots.
Oh.
It'll auto switch over.
Wow.
Yep.
I'm in.
That's a photojournalist dream right there. I was talking with somebody just this week, because I had the same thing. We were shooting something pretty cool, and of course, right in the middle of it, boom, I fill up a card, and okay, wasn't a job, so it wasn't an opportunity missed, so to speak, but it would have been a nice shot, and I remembered in the film era when I used to shoot stuff, we were constantly watching the film counter because if there was something cool coming up and I had like 5 or 6 shots left. Rewind it, put a fresh roll in. You just wasted those 5 or 6 shots, but you couldn't afford to run out of film in the middle. Even then, even if I was carrying 2 or 3 bodies, the time it takes to grab another body and everything, you might miss that shot. So, we used to just waste film all the time.
Wow.
And I knew lots of guys that shot like just 20 exposure rolls because they could get them out quicker.
Right.
And not have to, but then the same thing when you got to number 15, time to get it out. I can't afford it. So different era.
Right.
Different era.
Yeah,
we could shoot hundreds, if not
trying
thousands of pictures at a time.
And then waiting 4 or 5 days to get it back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of the journalism stuff then was black and white. Color maybe on the front page on the Sunday paper, and then eventually the weeklies got, the weekday papers got color. But the bulk of the stuff that I did when I shot, some stuff for papers here and there in the 80s was all black and white. And they'd just give us film. Here's 20 rolls of Tri-X.
Wow.
And I can remember one time we were shooting a high school football game at night. And I imagine you've done some high school football games.
I have, yeah.
The lighting was just terrible. I mean, if I'd have held up a candle, the brightness would have probably doubled. I mean, that's how dark this was. So we were shooting Tri-X, which was ISO 400, but we were exposing it, I think, at like 3200. And it had to be in the developer for 30 minutes. So we're sitting there developing this film, and we'd be in the dark room, and the editor would be knocking on the door. How much longer? I need those pictures. And it's like, oh, we got 10 more minutes, or it won't be anything. It's in the soup, as we used to say. They'd be knocking the door down. Wayne, I got to thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It has been a great pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, and we will have you back on the air soon.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was interesting, Lou.
Absolutely. It was certainly a pleasure. And really enjoy hearing how somebody not only gets started, but is succeeding in photography.
Oh, yeah. And I think it just goes to say that, again, so many people, I don't have the right equipment to do this or that. It's not the gear, it's the photographer.
Absolutely.
And so, Wayne's a great testament to that. That he's stuck it out and becoming kind of a journeyman in this business. He's been at it a few years and is really carving a niche in things. The rest of this show, we're going to talk about lenses.
Absolutely.
And Wayne, you're still here in the studio. If you've got something to chime in as we go, don't be bashful.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So lenses.
Yep.
What have you got for us, Lou? What are we going to talk about?
Well, we're going to talk about the different types of lenses, and I think we'll also probably talk about some of how some of the lenses have changed over the years. We were even talking a little about that over dinner tonight.
Sure.
But there's some basic categories that I think, there's fish eyes, full frame fish eyes, ultra wides, wide angles, normal lenses, portrait lenses, telephotos, super telephotos, macros, and then some of the stranger ones like reflex mirror lenses.
Right. and they're all out there today still. Yep. That's amazing. So let's tackle this. What's a normal lens?
Well, a normal lens, traditionally in 35 millimeter or on a full frame digital camera, is a 50 millimeter. It's varied some over the years. Some manufacturers considered it to be 45 millimeters. Some consider it to be like 58 millimeters, depending on the manufacturer. But it's that general range, 45 to 58. A lot of people have felt that sort of corresponds to the human eye's field of view.
Sure. And I think that's generally acknowledged, that that was kind of the concept, that it gave a similar kind of compression, gave your images a realistic, almost photojournalistic look, because it was as the eye saw it. And that's pretty accurate.
And there's a lot of things, as long as we started off talking about normal, a lot of advantages to those lenses.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have talked several times on the air about, for instance, the Canon 50 millimeter f1.8.
Right.
Which, you can pick up probably used for around $100 or so.
Oh, yeah. And new, it's not much more. It's maybe 130 new.
And it's probably going to be the sharpest lens that you have in the bag. Could
well be for many people. Very versatile, fast, so it's nice for low light, and it's not that expensive.
Right.
$130. And Nikon has a similar. They've got a 50 millimeter. Yeah.
They all do.
Yeah.
Whether it's Nikon, Pentax, Olympus, Sony, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And, there's certainly a trend today for individuals to get that maybe as a second lens, or maybe purchase it as their first lens, with the idea that people are saying, back in the old days, this is how we did it, and we learned to shoot manually, and you'll learn more about photography with it. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but the 50 millimeter lens is a nice lens. It's sharp. But I think a lot of people today, when they buy a lens or their digital camera, they're going to get what's called a kit lens. What would that be?
Well, you're probably looking at something like an 18 to 55.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a f/3.5 to 5.6.
Yep.
So it's a variable f-stop, and at 55 millimeters, it's going to be really slow.
Yeah, it'll be 5.6. So you're talking 2 stops, 3 stops slower than your 51.8.
Yep.
You know, you're 2.8, 4, 5.6. So you're 3 stops slower. And almost the same field of view or same angle of view from a 50 to a 55. You're splitting hairs. But the cool thing that most of the new kit lenses have from any manufacturer is image stabilization, or Nikon calls it VR. Sony's got their thing. Everybody's got something. So what's the big deal about image stabilization VR?
Well, image stabilization, I mean, the traditional way that it first came out was there is a prism inside the lens,
right,
and a little micro motor that moves that prism to take shake out of the field of view.
Right.
So that what hits the chip is steadier so that you get sharper images.
Right.
That's the traditional original one.
Sure.
Some of the manufacturers, like Olympus and Sony, moved the chip to try and take care of that same issue so that it's not built into the lenses.
Right.
I think there's a lot of advantage to it being in the lens. You know, the newer Canons, newer Nikons, newer Tamrons are now claiming to have a 4-stop gain
right.
in speeds, lower speeds, that you can handhold the camera.
Yeah.
And that's much tougher to do inside the camera with the chip.
Yeah, and the other advantage that I've noticed to image stabilization in the lens, which is mostly Canon and Nikon.
Right.
And I think the other guys didn't get into it. One, it's a marketing feature to have it in the body. Might be a little cheaper to build, that I don't know, but I imagine they ran into a patent issue as well, that there's only so many ways you can design this until, oh, that's Canon's patent. Oh, that's Nikon's patent. And maybe they don't want to share.
That one's Sigma's and this one's Tamron's. What's left?
Yeah. And but the thing that I noticed, because I've got a lens that it's one of the newer Canons that's got the 4-stop image stabilization. And when I'm shooting a moving object and I have the image stabilization on, it's my opinion, and I've also read it on the web, that the lens will autofocus faster because it stabilizes the image, and the autofocus sensors can be more accurate in following the object as it moves, can be more accurate because the object's not bouncing all over the place. So when you're in servo mode, that it's actually going to work better. I'm a huge fan of image stabilization and VR and all those other ones. But I do think if you're a serious photographer, you're going to want it in the lens, which is really Nikon, Canon, and then the Tamron and Sigma and Tokina and those guys. Okay, we've talked about kit lenses. We've talked about the 50 normals or something in that range. Let's go a little longer. When I've got, my son playing soccer or this or that, what am I really going to be talking about? How am I going to get those shots? Because I can't walk onto the soccer field. They kind of yell at me when I do that. Hey, old man, get off the field. So what do I need to shoot my my son at a soccer game, say? Well,
I think for the average person really looking to do those kinds of family things, what's known as a telephoto or telezoom,
right?
Which can be something like 50, 55 to 200, something like that.
Yeah, those are some of the kit lenses. I know Nikon and Canon both have a couple of kit lenses that are like 55, 250s in that range with the IS or VR, maybe not the 4-stop, but 2-stop. So it's going to zoom from 55. It kind of picks up where your other one leaves off, goes out to 200, 250. So that's going to get me the soccer shots I want.
Well, it may or may not. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of those kinds of
Wayne, you're over there laughing. You've probably shot a soccer game or two.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what do you use?
Monopod. You got to have them for those long lenses.
Oh, yeah,
That's
for sure.
It's a long hold and far away. You just got to have something steady on there.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, really, for that longer stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
For me, that's the key to the longer lens is the monopod.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But
No question.
but is that going to get me in the ballpark? A 200 millimeter, 250 millimeter lens?
Well, most of us, when we try and shoot, whether it's athletics like that or oftentimes nature or bird photography or something, you become millimeter limited that
Right.
you wish you had more. The next step for the average person is something like a 70 to 300,
Yeah.
which is going to pick them up that much more. They're not going to lose anything in terms of speed. Both of the lenses will probably be 4 to 5.6
Right.
or 4.5 to 5.6.
Yeah.
And there are some good ones out there, and they aren't that much more money. However, as Wayne just reminded everybody, the longer they get, the harder it is to hold them steady.
Yeah.
So that monopod becomes even more important when you're out there at 300 millimeter compared to 200 millimeters. Because just as it magnifies the image
Yep.
and makes that image appear closer, it magnifies the shake.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I would say, while I have a fast 70 to 200 that I use, and Wayne, you know that's in your bag as well. But the 300 millimeter seems to really get the job done more for me, and I know Nikon has it's one of their EDIF. It's not super fast. It's I think a 4.5, 5.6, something like that. But it's only about $600, and a number of people have raved about that lens. From Jay Mizell, who I'm a big fan of his street photography, he uses it in street photography. Scott Kelby's written about it on his blog in the past, and we've got plenty of members in the group that I've recommended that lens to, and it's a phenomenal lens at about $600. And I think truly better than the Canon offering. They make a 75 to 300 that's a dog. The 70 to 300's a little better. They make a 70 to 300 that's got image stabilization, and that's not too bad, especially the newer one. I had the older one, and I wouldn't call it a dog, but it wasn't much better. But you've got a favorite 70 to 300.
Yes, I do. Tamron last year released a 70 to 300, and if you're not familiar with Tamron, it's what they call their SP lens, which is special performance.
Right.
They only put that on their better lenses.
Right.
And it's a 4 to 5.6, not a 4.5 to 5.6, so it's a half stop faster at the low end.
Right.
But when you look at the image charts on it and compare it to Canons and some of the others, it is a very good lens. And currently it has a $100 rebate on it. You can, I mean, it's just a good buy.
Yeah. And we've actually looked at it on some of the sites I like to go to.
Yeah.
Photozone.de, the German site. Now, the site's in English. You can read it, but that's one of my favorites for looking at all lenses. And they do some of the Tamrons, the Sigmas, the Tokinas, what I call third-party lenses. And, of course, they do the manufacturer's lenses, Canon, Nikon mostly. But they do some Sonys and some Pentaxes, I think. And the other one is the-digital-picture.com. Terrible web address with the hyphens and the thes, but oh well. It has a resolution chart where you can do A/B comparisons like side by side, and I know we've done those many times at the Wednesday coffees at O'Keefe's, and we brought up that Tamron 70 to 300, and I was stunned that it was as good as it was. That's a good buy.
Yeah, it is. You know, it's right up to date in the features too.
Yeah.
You know, it's got the 4-stop image stabilization. It's got their what they call a USD lens, which is like Canon's ultrasonic, so it's got the really fast autofocus.
Yep.
And it's really interesting how their vibration control works.
Mm-hmm. They have little elves in there, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And when you push down on the shutter, you can see the vibration control kick in.
Yeah.
But after you take the image, it's still there.
Yeah.
It goes on for another second.
Yeah.
So that it remains stabilized in case you're trying to take more
another
images.
shot. Yeah. That's pretty cool. So let's say I'm really what I like to call focal length limited or lens limited, as you said. If I need to go, if I'm really into birds and nature and wildlife, and I need to go beyond 300 millimeters, what are my options that way?
Well, you almost lose the zoom pretty generally. I mean, there are a couple like Canon's 100 to 400.
Yep. Yeah, that's a nice lens.
But now you start getting into the super telephotos, which are, 400, 500, 600 millimeters.
Big bucks in most cases.
Big bucks. Sigma has some crazy lenses. What is it? They're 200 to 500.
Yeah, it's a 2.8 or something.
Yeah,
it's only 30,000.
Yeah, it's $30,000.
Yeah. You're getting me one for Christmas, aren't you?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. It's got this crazy handle on the top of it, too. It's like for two boys to carry or something.
Yeah, right.
Your Sherpas.
I read somebody tested it or got to review it, and they had a problem when they tried to lay it in the back seat in its case. They couldn't close the doors.
Wow. Oops. But, there's that. But even on a more realistic basis, Sigma's got like the 50 to 500 that they make, and the other one that's like it's a 150 to 500, and they've had several versions of that.
They've had various, 200 to 500s. They've got a lot of odd focal lengths there that are fairly expensive. Yeah. But primarily from people like Nikon or Canon, once you get beyond a 100 to 400, you're into fixed focal length, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a little harder to work with.
Yeah, and Nikon's got like a 300 f4 that's a fixed focal length. Canon's got a 300 f4. So there are some of those. Canon even makes a 400 5.6 that's fixed focal length, but no image stabilization. So it's still fairly affordable because that lens has been around so long and it's very sharp. But still, for someone like Wayne shooting sports, 5.6 would be a killer.
I would kill me unless it's a beautiful, sunny, bright day.
Yeah,
right.
Shoot some high school sports. And
I got a question for you guys. I saw I get these tweets or these Facebooks about lenses that are coming out, and there was a photograph. I don't know if Sigma or Tamron that came out. It's a 70 to 200 1.8.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody got a picture of one, and it's coming.
Yeah, there's some interest. Well, Sigma just released I got to make sure I get this right, an 18 to 35. Now it's going to be a crop sensor lens. It's right now it's not a full frame. f1.8. So it's a super fast zoom, and nobody makes anything else like that. And I'm normally the first guy to go, if you own a Canon, buy a Canon lens. You own a Nikon, buy a Nikon lens. But Sigma, over the last 5 years, has really tried to be very, very innovative. They have a series of lenses that they're taking extra quality control measures with and using better materials and things like that. Sigma is really trying to be, the third party that everybody thinks about. But an 18 to 35 f1.8, that would be very tempting to me. If it's sharp.
And I probably can see that in a lot of ways, because with computer-aided design, as we get more and more of the exotic glass and the ED and extra low ED and all these different kinds of aspherical and the rest of that stuff. It opens up the possibilities for the designers, and all it takes is for a company like Sigma to be willing to push the envelope a little.
Yeah. They seem to have the desire to do it, and their engineers are coming up with some great stuff. So.
Well, and it's one of those things, and this is more of a soapbox, but part of it is, there is a Mr. Sigma.
Oh yeah, it is a family business.
It's his name's not Sigma. I don't know what it is, his Japanese name, but it's a family business.
Yeah,
and it makes a difference. They can do what they want to do.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So there's something that we haven't talked about that might be an alternative for a few people, and it also brings up a question that we got, and I'll read the question. But teleconverters. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on them? Pluses, minuses? Should I run out and buy a couple of teleconverters? What do I need to do?
Well, if you have something like that 300 f4 and you need a little more, and you put a 1.4 on, which will take it out to about 420.
Yep.
And it'll take it to an f5.6.
Right. You lose a stop of light.
You lose a stop of light. That's probably okay.
Yeah.
Because you've got the extra sharpness in a prime lens to give a little bit.
Yep.
Putting them on zooms is a little questionable.
Yeah.
Canon has their teleconverters set up, which I think is very wise, that they will only fit on certain zooms, that there at least is a fair amount of potential that it'll be effective.
Right. Yeah, they've optimized the lens design to match with a couple. I've got the Canon 51.4, and Wayne, you've borrowed it from me a couple of times.
Yeah.
The front element protrudes, and so if the lens has a rear element that's almost right flush with the mount, literally you can't get it on.
Yep.
And so, because that lens wasn't designed for it, and Canon says, hey, the optical design's not going to be there, the sharpness isn't going to meet our standards. So those folks, if you've got a generic lens like that, or a third-party lens, then you have to look at like the Kenco teleconverters. They make a couple. I know Tamron is still making teleconverters. Sigma, they match some of theirs.
Yeah. And my opinion is on a consumer level zoom like 70 to 300 or a 55 to 200 or 250 or one of those ultra wide ranges like 18 to 200.
Yep.
Not a good idea.
No. The more you ask a lens to do kind of the jack of all trades kind of syndrome, you've got a lens that's going to, and then I'll pick on Tamron here, but they're not the only one. Nikon just came out with an 18 to 300.
Right.
And a couple of our members have it. It looks nice. I haven't shot with it. I haven't seen any pictures shot with it yet, so we'll see. But things I've read online, I'm a little more optimistic about the Nikkor lens. But the Tamron, that 18 to 270, it's kind of a dog. I'll come out and say it. I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't shoot with it. But if it fits your budget, okay. But put a teleconverter on that, and I have seen people do that. And it's pretty abysmal. The image quality really, really suffers. You lose a stop of light. That lens is 6.3 already, so now you're out around f9, f10. That's
really not
slow.
going to autofocus. That's another issue that we didn't talk about with teleconverters. Slower lenses aren't going to autofocus.
Yeah, particularly the Canons now. Most of those are trapped at 5.6. Nikon seems to be expanding their element. They didn't have anything that autofocused at f8. Now they're starting to introduce more bodies that will autofocus at f8. So in the Canon lineup, you've got to go to one of their pro lenses. But the 5D Mark III that we were talking about as a photojournalistic lens, when the new firmware for it comes out the end of the month, Canon has said it will autofocus at f8.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
The other thing that a lot of people don't know about the manufacturer's teleconverters is they actually will slow down the autofocusing speed. I've got the Canon 1.4, I've got a Canon 2X, and I know I'm going to get the numbers a little off, but when you put a 1.4 on, Canon actually slows the focus down so that it can be more accurate and it can lock the focus, but it's not going to snap in as fast. And the 1.4 gets slowed about 30%, and the 2X gets slowed about 70%.
Wow.
And a lot of people, and the Nikons are in the same range. Because the problem is, if they don't slow it down, it'll overshoot. Because the lens, the algorithms just weren't really designed for it. Even though they're starting to make the teleconverters smarter with chips and things to help, they slow the speed down so that they don't constantly overshoot the subject. But to get back, this is Matt. He sent this question in. He says he has a Tamron 70 to 200 2.8, and he wants more power. And I think we kind of answered this, so we'll just read it. The two alternatives that he sees, he's shooting on a Canon T3i, nice mid-range Rebel. He's looking at the Canon EF 100 to 400, which Teresa and I actually own. I think that's a pretty cool lens. It's got image stabilization. but he figures with filters and everything else, it's going to cost him about $1,600. There might be a rebate on it now. Who knows? This lens has image stabilization, it points out. Or should he purchase the Canon EF 2X Series 3 extender, lose 2 stops? The extender has a built-in microprocessor to communicate with the camera. Well, it sort of does. But he figures the cost of that will save him $1,000. Excuse me, and he can put it towards a second camera body. He wants to know what our opinions are on that. Well, I think the first thing he needs to know is that Canon teleconverter isn't going to work on his Tamron lens.
Yeah, we kind of talked about how that works.
Yeah, he would have to look at, and I think as
Kenko or Tamron or somebody.
Yeah, unless that lens has one matched for it from Tamron, I would look at.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I would look at the good 7-element multi-coated Kenko. And I think that thing's around $200.
Yeah, probably.
So about half the price of the Canon. Yeah. So he would actually have more money. And I guess what I would do is I would try the teleconverter first. If he likes the quality, he's good to go.
Yep.
If he doesn't, he can probably sell it and get all of his money back. Or if he does it within like the 30-day return period at B&H or Adorama, he could try it for 30 days. If he doesn't like the quality, then he knows what he's got to do. Send that thing back, and he's going to have to get something like the 1:4.
Yep.
But he's got a couple of options that way. But and the other option would be instead of the 2X, because we talked about the quality difference there too.
Yeah, the 1.4.
Maybe just go with the 1.4. That would get him out to 280. That may not be enough bump. So again, I think he's going to have to crack that nut and spend $1,600. His other question, which you and I looked into real quick before the show, he has an older Canon lens, one of the FLs, not an FD mount, but an old FL, what we used to call the breech mount. It's a 55 millimeter f1.2, so real nice fast lens. He bought it when he bought his old Canon film camera, an FTQL. How can I make this compatible with his T3i? And I did some digging, and it jogged my memory. I went to a website, and they're talking about the Ed Mika mount. Mm-hmm. His first name's Ed. He's up in Canada. Last name is spelled M-I-K-A. M-I-K-A. And if you search Ed Mika Canon mounts, you'll find that he sells these things on eBay. He hand machines brass lens mounts to fit. And it's a real simple. There's a YouTube. If you search this guy, you take out 4 or 5 screws, take the old mount out, put the new brass mount on, screw it down, and boom, you're ready to go. And we looked up this lens. Some copies are going for as much as $1,000 on eBay.
Yep.
And this would get you a fast f2. It won't autofocus, but it's got chips in it, so it kind of gives you focus confirmation and does some things that way. You could shoot at aperture priority or manual, and you put $1,000 lens to work for you. The mount's about $140 and about $20 of shipping. You might have to pay some duty or something coming across the border.
And it'll probably take a little bit of time because it has to go to Canada and back from Canada. So probably not going to get it overnight.
No, but looks like a real cool way. Let us know what you decide to do, Matt, and I'd love to see some pictures from that if you go ahead and get that converted. But to me,
absolutely.
That seems like a great deal for $160 to be able to put one of the older great Canon lenses to use. But anyway, that takes care of that question. We've talked about telephotos and a little bit about super telephotos. Going the other way, we talked about the kit lens and a normal. What are we getting into when I decide I want to shoot some scenery, or I'm downtown Tampa and I want to get the tops of some of those buildings in? What kind of lens do I need for that, Lou?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is wide angle, but these days there's more and more trend into what we call ultra wides.
Sure.
And they're typically a zoom for the crop sensor cameras, anywhere from a 12 to 24 down to maybe a 10 to 20 or 10 to 22.
Okay.
They're not terribly fast. A good one is a 3.5 to 4.5. Some might be a little slower.
Right.
There's always a certain level of distortion, and there's some skill that you need to have with those lenses to keep everything from looking like it's falling over backwards or falling on you.
You mean the buildings in my pictures? They're
Yeah.
really not going to hit me. They're
Yeah.
not falling over. Oh,
No.
geez, I didn't know that.
But they're really a fun lens, and they open up another perspective. And I think that's something that we didn't really talk about, which is changing lenses
Yep.
and buying a new lens and a focal length that you haven't had, can kind of open up some creativity. It gives you a different kind of a view of the same subjects
Right.
and allows you to get a little more creative. So whether it's going into a telephoto or going into a wide angle of some kind,
Sure.
beyond what that kit lens is, really opens up some creative potential for you.
What kind of wide angles do you use, Wayne?
Actually, I just got the 17 to 35.
Oh, yeah.
That 2.8.
That's
It's a beautiful lens.
Yeah, I've tried to pick that up a couple times on Craigslist, and I'm always just. That's probably you.
That's
You're,
where
you're,
I got
you're
it.
probably one step
got
ahead,
it.
right? You got my lens, buddy.
But I don't know what that retails for. What do they retail
Close
for?
to $1,000.
Yeah,
they're about $1,000.
I got it a few $100s under that.
Yeah.
And it was a great shape.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great because that is a real cool lens.
Yeah, I like it.
So ultra wides. What's out there? What am I looking at? I mean, I've got
You've got the Canon.
I've got the Canon 10 to 22, and that gives a pretty wide field of view, I've got to say.
Yep.
But
My memory is Sigma has a 10 to 20.
yeah, they've had a couple of those actually. They've had a,
they've
in
had
that
a series. And I'll tell you who else has done a nice job on some ultra wides is Tokina.
Yeah,
They have some interesting ones. They have a 11 to 16 2.8.
yeah, and they've also got like for a full frame, it's like a 16 to 28 2.8. Mm-hmm. Both of those are extremely highly rated, which
Yep.
I find shocking, but that's just me. Actually, Sigma is making one that I might have to break down and buy. It's for a crop sensor only, but it's an 8 to 16 millimeter. And I've had people go, what's the difference between 8 and 10 millimeters?
Ooh.
A lot when you get at that low end. It's but that's because people think it's all this mathematical progression. So they go, what's the difference between 100 and 102 millimeters? It can't be much, So 8 and 10 doesn't work that way. It's not a true linear scale.
No, it's not at all.
One of our members, Grant, rented one a couple of years ago when we went to the Frank Lloyd Wright School over in Lakeland. Florida Southern College, I think it's called. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I got to shoot a couple shots, but boy, I mean, we had the 10 to 22, and I put that 8 millimeter on. It's like, wow, this is wide. And I think I see a lot of things wide angle. I don't see a lot of normal shots. So, the two lenses a lot of times I'll walk around with is a 70 to 200 on a crop, and then the 10 to 22. And I except for bird stuff I do where I want a little longer, those two lenses cover exactly the way that I see the world. But then I'm getting old and can't carry a bag like Wayne anymore with a dozen lenses in
that's
it.
shrunk too. I'm down to a smaller bag. I don't have to lug that laptop anymore. I'm down to the iPad.
Yeah.
That makes things a little easier.
Yeah, boy, I'll say. So people need a wide angle, and we've mentioned a couple of great ones there. The other thing that I think people need to be aware of is, because I do hear that a lot. They go, the idea is neat, but I just don't like all my buildings leaning and all this kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people don't realize the lens correction modules that the software companies are putting out. Lightroom 4 has it. The new version of Lightroom 5, which I don't know if I mentioned on the show. I've mentioned it at some of the meetups for the Florida Center for Creative Photography. But you can get Lightroom 5 for free for a couple months. It's the beta version. But one of the most highly talked about tools is it's got this new feature to correct that much, much more than what was available in Lightroom 4 and the Adobe 7.4, whatever it is, RAW converter. So, but Photoshop CS6 has a very cool correction feature as well. You kind of connect the dots with it. You draw all these lines, and then it does the math. That's pretty cool too. But that's a $700 program, so to speak. So people need to be aware there are some like one-click fixes that will straighten up a lot of these pictures.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Sure.
really cool to see that done in software. So, okay, we're kind of figuring out where I'm going with this. You mentioned kind of one more category, maybe two, one being macro, and I think that's something, we've got a few minutes left in the show. We'll finish up with macro maybe.
Okay.
And so why would I need a macro lens? I've got a telephoto, I've got my ultra-wide, I broke down about a 50-millimeter lens to shoot with or something in that range, or, I've still got my kit zoom. What's a macro going to do for me?
Well, that's going to take care of your close-ups.
Yeah.
If you want to shoot whether it's insects or whether it's, and of course that's a traditional one, or flowers, foliage, things like that, the close-ups, very much.
Yeah.
You need a macro lens to get in close.
Right.
And your traditional focal lengths are typically somewhere around 50 millimeters. Tamron does a 60. I think Canon's gone to a 60, if I remember.
Yeah, for their crop stuff,
Yeah.
they got a 60. They still got the old 50.
And there's a typically around 100. Nikon traditionally did 105.
Yeah, Canon does a couple of 100.
And Nikon used to do a 200.
Yeah, that was a fine lens.
I had one of those. That
Did
was
you
a
really?
great
I did
lens.
not know that.
And Sigma has pushed it out to 180 on some of theirs.
Yeah.
Although you can make a pretty good case, and I sound like I'm a salesman for Tamron, but I'm really not. They're
You
macros.
might be after this show.
They're
Jeez,
macros. They're 60 millimeter macro and they're 90 millimeter macro. Those have been some of the sharpest, best macros on the market for years and years.
Yeah, they really put some money into it. But the thing is, you need to compare because they're, a lot of times people buy the third-party lenses because they're a lot cheaper.
And those aren't.
Those are almost as expensive as the Nikon and Canon.
But you're really getting good quality.
Yep. I've got a 60 macro that Teresa and I like a lot. But for a lot of things, it's just not the working distance that I want. And that's what the longer telephotos give you, that I don't have to get right on top of my subject. Mm-hmm. I can be back several feet or more, which is nice if you're shooting butterflies, things like that. I mean, try getting 9 inches away from a butterfly. That's going to be a pretty frustrating experience. But that's great. We've wrapped up some lens things. We've missed a couple. Maybe we'll hit those in a future show. But some of the mirror lenses and more oddball stuff, the true fisheye lenses, we'll have to address sometimes. But I want to let listeners know about a unique thing that's coming up for you in the Clearwater area. Wayne, you may want to join us. Sunday, May 5th, we are going to do a live remote broadcast, so you can come and be a part of the audience at the Capitol Beer House at 428 Cleveland Street, downtown Clearwater. There's free parking on the street. There's free parking behind it. It's right next door to Tony's Pizzeria, across the street from the Starbucks. You and I are going to be there. Our guest that evening is going to be Jim Caldwell, who is an international photographer, leads tours and everything. I've been on Jim's podcast a couple of times. It's going to be a great time. Come on out Sunday, May 5th. Wayne, I think you said you'll be joining us.
I'll be out there for that one. That's great.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
Sure.
Get a great cold beer. Wayne, thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
For Lou Donald, for Wayne Cathell, this is Jeff Donald. Thank you for joining us on Picture This. You folks have a great evening. We'll catch you next week. Good night now.
Good night.